Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Michele Scarlet's True Health Podcast. Today we're speaking to Jennifer Lanie. Jennifer is the Get Better Girl, helping find the root cause of people's illness to help them rebuild their health. Thank you so much for coming on today, Jennifer. How are you doing?
I'm doing great today, Michelle, and thank you so much for having me here.
Amazing. Yeah, you're always welcome. So before we dive right into what you do for people, can you tell our listeners a little bit about your journey to becoming a health coach and how you ultimately became the Get Better Girl?
Yeah. Well, my journey started really probably about 30 years ago when I went to college and I was pursuing a degree in pre-med with the intention of going on to becoming a physician. It was something that I really wanted to do, but life happens, and that path didn't quite work out for me at that time. So I did lots of other things. I was a high school biology teacher for a long time, among some other things. I was also a CrossFit coach for a long time. So I was really had the opportunity to be in that health and wellness space. But then I had my own experience with sort of a health situation that kind of changed things for me and how I looked at medicine and the world of wellness, so to speak. When I was about 35, I think, I was diagnosed with lupus. And it was a really sort of scary and frustrating time because I knew I felt really sick, but I couldn't pinpoint what was going on. I was really tired and I was bruising and losing hair. And I was so young, and I was pretty healthy. I was working out. I hadn't started CrossFit yet at that point, but I thought I was doing all the right things. And then come to find out, I got that diagnosis of lupus and went to a specialist. And that moment for me when I was in the office with the rheumatologist, and they kind of looked at me and said, well, there's really nothing that we can do for you. You're going to have this for the rest of your life. We can control your symptoms, and here are some prescriptions for that. And I remember I got a prescription for hydroquinone and some ibuprofen, that I was supposed to take the ibuprofen 4 times a day, and this other medication that I looked at that had a list of side effects as long as my arm. And I walked out of there and threw the prescriptions in the garbage.
Wow.
Because even though I knew I felt terrible, I also kind of instinctively or intuitively knew that adding those medications wasn't going to help me get better. It was only going to make me feel worse. So
question for you.
Sure.
Was your diagnosis while you were in med school or pre-med?
No, this was much later on.
So this is later on. Okay. So
Yeah.
can I just back you up and ask what made you change your mind from being pre-med?
Well, when I was in college, I had endometriosis.
Okay.
So another health scare, but again, I was really young at the time, and so definitely went down the route of traditional medicine. I ended up having 2 surgeries for that and was able to kind of finally get it under control, but was really sick during college. And so when I graduated, I wanted to take a year off. I just wasn't ready to do the testing that you need to do to apply for medical school. I was really burnt out I worked during college, probably too many hours, and studied a lot. I was a very type A type person. And so I really did a lot of things to my health that were probably very counterproductive to being healthy, and probably in retrospect was really a lot of what precipitated the actual endometriosis. But then I ended up getting engaged and married and having a baby. I got a job in pharmaceutical sales and sort of as a different path for a while. And, the rest is sort of history, as they say. I didn't end up pursuing that dream of becoming a physician and being able to help people with their wellness. And that was in part because I wasn't in a place where I was able to do that.
Sure. That's interesting. Okay. So I just wanted to know that. I wanted to know if it was connected to, like you said, you threw out that prescription after you spoke with the rheumatologist, and you didn't want to be taking meds for the rest of your life. I just was curious to know if there was a connection between something happening in pre-med and like intuitively knowing that the medical system wasn't exactly where you wanted to be.
Well, as I said, I was a pharmaceutical rep. pharmaceutical sales rep. I did that for 9 years, and I had a really good understanding of the investment that pharmaceutical companies make in getting you onto medications and keeping you on medications. And I understand, I had an understanding of how side effects really work. And I just didn't want to, I didn't want to put myself into that position of that trial and error and just that constant need to have a new medication all the time. I'd seen so many people kind of go through that, and I just didn't feel like that was the right path for me.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I know that you and I, being in a similar space, feel like, well, you know what, I won't speak for you. I feel like there is absolutely a need for Western medicine. I am not by no means saying that they shouldn't exist in this world. I am an advocate for Western medicine in general. However, the push for pharmaceuticals, the push to remove organs, like, is really just kind of a wild concept to me. And like you said, it tends to be this sort of trial and error, and we're all sort of bred to just trust these doctors. And again, like I said, nothing against these doctors. This is the way they are trained. This is the way their brain thinks, and they don't really think outside the box. So here you are. We'll fast forward now. You've thrown these prescriptions out, and what did you decide to do?
Well, I do just want to comment on what you just said. I too feel that there's definitely a place for doctors and medicine, right? If I'm in a car accident, I definitely want to have a physician who can help me,
Absolutely.
if I have a catastrophic kind of injury, or I have cancer or something of that nature, right? But for the day-to-day person who is just having symptoms and not feeling well, you're perfectly correct in saying that doctors they're just not qualified, they're not trained to help kind of get to the root of the cause. And I knew that then because of my experience in the pharmaceutical industry, which I had left at that point. And that was partly why I had left, because it just wasn't a good fit for me. And so, yeah, I threw those prescriptions away, and I started to do a lot of research on my own, but I just couldn't get myself to a place where I was feeling better. So I did seek out help from a naturopath at the time. And it was the first time I went into an office where someone actually sat there and listened to me.
Sure.
And
That makes all the difference. All the difference.
yeah, it was such a shift. It was that difference between going to that rheumatologist who's supposed to be this specialist who had no bedside manner at all, and then going into this woman who spent 2 hours with me, and we went through every symptom, and she just asked tons of questions, and I felt heard for the first time. And that for me was a real turning point. I mean, physically, it was a huge turning point, because she got me on a protocol that got me into a place where I was able to basically control the lupus up until a few years ago. But it also was a big turning point for me, because that's when I really saw another side of medicine, and a side that I really wanted to be a part of. And just, timing wise, it wasn't a good time for me at that point, but I knew at that point that was really where I wanted to go with my life. It took me another 15 years to get there, but that
But you
was,
got there.
yeah. And that was that turning point for me, that aha moment.
Yeah, yeah. I had a very similar story. I was 15 years as a personal trainer, owning a gym, running myself ragged, and literally walking the path to autoimmunity. And COVID hit, and I was like, here in Toronto, everything shut down for a very long time in my industry. And I was like, I am sick and I don't know where to go from here. And we went down the same path ultimately,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
looking for a holistic way to heal ourselves, and show other people that they don't necessarily need prescriptions for the rest of their life.
Yeah. And that's exactly how I got to where I am here today with the Get Better Girl, which is, I had some very personal, stressful situations that happened just prior to COVID that precipitated my lupus coming out of remission. I had a flare, and and it kind of snowballed from there. Then COVID hit, and then I got a tick bite early on at the beginning of COVID in April of 2020, and I got Lyme from that. And then it just became one thing after another. All the things that I had done in the past just didn't work anymore.
Wow.
And I didn't know about removing all stressors. I think that that is such a big piece that, we focus on as FDNs, but no one really tells you about. So it was one of those things, like just month after month, feeling worse and worse and worse, and thinking that, I mean, I turned 50 in December. And so I know I'm not a spring chicken anymore, but I kept thinking to myself, like, I'm too young to feel this old, and I have so much more life to live. I don't want to feel lousy like this for another 30 years. I want to feel good again. I want to be able to have a vibrant, full life.
Yeah.
Even though I am in that category where, we're older and people say, well, it's just normal, right? You get older, your body changes, you start to have aches and pains. It's fine. This is what should be happening. But I just totally disagree. And
Oh,
and
yeah.
that's and so that's how I found FDN. And just like you talked about, I chose FDN because I knew I needed to heal myself first. But I'm so passionate about helping other people who are kind of in that situation where they're feeling hopeless. They go to the doctor and the test results come back normal and they feel crazy. And I know that feeling, and it's just a horrible, horrible feeling, and you don't know where to go. And
Yeah.
as someone, who came from sort of the science background and pharmaceuticals and the health and fitness industry, I had a lot of knowledge, but I still didn't know what I needed to do. And it
Yeah.
was scary.
Yeah. So, okay, a couple of things on what you just said. So you went the traditional medicine route. So we know that didn't end up working for you. Like you had already talked about, like not great bedside manner, really didn't listen to you, kind of just pushed some prescriptions and said, well, we can't do anything. You're going to feel like crap for the rest of your life, kind of thing. You felt crazy. I've been there. I've been dismissed by my doctor. I think in 2020, I left my doctor's office 4 times in tears because there was like no path to go, but I knew something wasn't normal. And I think that that is a huge point to take away for the listeners here, that the idea of getting older doesn't equal getting sicker. Like the two do not have to correlate at all. And I had the exact same thought when I was like sort of falling ill. I thought I was only 30, and I was like, what is wrong with me? How am I not able to get out of bed in the morning? Like, how is this possible? And a girlfriend of mine, she's like, well, you're 30 now. And I'm like, this is insane. Didn't have kids. I wasn't married. Like life was just footloose and fancy free, and I struggled to get out of bed in the morning, and I was like, don't plan on living like this for the rest of my life. And if my medical doctor isn't going to listen, or all she's going to say is, you're depressed, here's some antidepressants, or you're anxious, here's some anti-anxiety medications, like that was not the path I was taking.
And when you get to be older and you go to your doctor, I went to my GYN, I had my annual, and I shared things with her, and she was like, well, you're almost 50 and your hormones are changing, and this is just normal. And that's coming straight from the mouth of a physician who I adore, by the way. I think she's wonderful, and I don't, I'm not saying anything disparaging about her, but just that idea in general that when you get old, you're going to get sick, and you're just not going to be able to do the things that you want to do. And I just don't subscribe to that. I want to have this fulfilling life well into to the day I die, right? I want to be kicking it until I kick it.
I love that. I'm actually going to quote you on that later. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I agree with you. The word normal is a very strange word, and I don't like to use it very often with anybody, because no, that's not normal. You should feel vibrant, full of vitality. Are you going to have low days? Sure, we're all going to have low days. That's not the same thing.
It's not the same as not being able to get out of bed in the morning. And that's where I was at.
Yeah.
6 months ago, I couldn't get out of bed in the morning. And I was exhausted all day long. And it took every bit of energy just to get through my day, never mind try to go exercise or cook a healthy meal or do anything fun. I wanted to sit on the couch and watch Netflix.
Yeah. Yeah. You just couldn't get motivated to do anything. I fully get that. So you go through the FDN training. For those who don't know, that's functional diagnostic nutrition. We are both functional diagnostic nutrition practitioners. So you go through the training and you see your own lab results. And what do you think?
It was, well, it was completely eye-opening for me. And of course, as I started to learn things, I kind of anticipated what my lab results were going to be. And they were even much worse than I had suspected. I was in extreme adrenal fatigue. I was in the exhaustive phase of HPA axis dysfunction. So I was down at the bottom of this curve that kind of has little skull and crossbones in it, because it kind of signifies, like, if you continue on this path, that's where you're headed. And so that was sort of the first big piece. And then I found that I was estrogen dominant, and all these other things. I had leaky gut and toxic, it was very toxic. I couldn't process proteins, and my liver wasn't working right, and on and on. So it was
A perfect storm.
yeah, and not shocking. It was just eye-opening, and it made perfect sense. Like, oh, well, now I understand why I'm so tired, and now I understand why I've gained 20 pounds and I can't lose weight, and now I understand, you fill in the blanks with the kind of symptoms that I was having. It all made sense to me at that point. And then it was just a matter of taking the protocol that was shared with me by my FDN mentor and putting it into practice.
Yeah. So how was it different working with your naturopath? So you go from medical doctor to naturopath to an FDN helping you in your health journey. What was the difference between, or the major difference between, the naturopath and the FDN protocol?
Well, with the FDN protocol, when you meet with your FDN, they go through every marker with you that you test, and they explain to you what they're testing for and what your results mean. And well, I loved my naturopath. She didn't do any of that with me. I did do testing, but I didn't understand why I was doing the testing, and I didn't understand what we found out. And as someone who loves science and who loves all of that kind of nitty-gritty background information, I would have appreciated that kind of information.
Sure.
But I think too, it's also, again, it's for someone that's been going to their doctor and having lab tests and just, well, it's normal, you're fine. For someone to come back and say, okay, here are your results, and I'm going to explain every single one of them to you so you know what they mean. I think that's just such a far cry from what standard medicine does. They just, you come in, you're just a number. Here's your prescription for XYZ, and there you go. Call me if things get worse.
Like, wow, what help?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think with the FDN, working with the FDN, it was just a lot more comprehensive, and I felt a lot more supported.
Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah, I agree. I would say that I felt the same way. And that's how in my practice, I like to work with my clients as well. I don't ever want them to feel like they're just sort of left to their own devices. And I went same path, doctor, naturopath, and, doctor was not very helpful in the chronic issues. Naturopath moved the needle like a little bit, gave me a broader understanding, but still didn't take me all the way.
Yeah. What I did with the naturopath, it was able to get me into a place of remission. And then I found CrossFit, and I was eating paleo and doing lots of good things. But there was also this huge stress component in my life. I was in a really difficult marriage. I was in a job that I didn't really love. There were a lot of really stressful pieces that were kind of, they didn't tip the scale for me at that point, but they were tapping into my vital reserve in a way that was making it so that when something big happened, that it kind of pushed me over the edge. And that was kind of, that kind of is what happened, after I had a divorce and I started a business that failed epically after I moved across the country. I crashed and burned.
Yeah.
It was just, my body couldn't take it anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I get that. Okay. So tell me what you did to rebuild your health, or what you continue to do. ultimately health is not very linear. It ultimately, like, you are going to be forever looking after your own health and well-being. So tell me what it is that you do currently, did to get yourself to this point, and ultimately what process you would take your clients through.
So for the first thing was diet. So dialing in my metabolic typing diet, and then also removing sensitive foods that we found through the MRT, the food sensitivity test. And those things actually moved the needle for me a ton. And so I continue to play with that and work with that, because it's, I think, so foundational that you can't get away from it. And I think for me, I know that I was doing really well, when I, like I said, when I was doing CrossFit and I was eating paleo and I was, staying really on track, but kind of fell off the rails a little bit because of my life falling apart, and moved away from that. So I understand how important those things are. So that was really the first big piece for me. And that made a huge difference. Uh, for me, because I was in the exhaustive phase, I had to really pull back from exercise. So no more high intensity. I've had to take a break from CrossFit and move to doing yoga, which I've found that I really love. And I've had to learn to listen to my body a lot more. So
Yeah.
when I'm tired, I've let myself rest. And I've really kind of given myself a lot of space to heal. So those were kind of the first two really big pieces for me. And then, some smaller things like changing out products from standard to, personal care products and house cleaning products to non-toxic and organic things, and being more careful about the kinds of foods that I'm buying, not just buying ground beef, but grass-fed ground beef, and more organics, when I can afford them and I can fit them in, because I understand that it's a continuum, right? You can't replace everything all at once. You can't do everything all at once, but small things over time make big changes.
Absolutely.
So that's been sort of the other big piece. And then some supplementation. I mean, supplements have been a really big part. I had been using some supplements before that had worked, but those had been recommended to me 15 years ago by my naturopath. So they were a little out of date for what my body needed, and they weren't getting me to a place that I needed to be. So I really leaned into the supplement protocol that my FDN gave me, and that made a big difference as well.
Yeah, absolutely. If somebody came to you and said, I can't participate in a full program today, like a full FDN program today, but I need some tips. I need to start like unloading this toxicity in my body. Can you give me or give them 3 major components that would really like kickstart somebody's health journey?
Yeah, so I would say number one would be to focus on your diet. Remove as many stressful foods as you possibly can. So those would be things like refined sugar, dairy, gluten, soy for a lot of people, alcohol for sure, and really focus on eating whole foods. Try to prepare as much as you can at home. That would be number one.
So I just want to be specific, because I have absolutely had people ask me what a whole food is. Can you go into a little detail about what a whole food
Sure. Yeah, a whole food is a food that kind of has one ingredient. So you find it the way it grows in nature. So a carrot is a whole food. A carrot cake is not a whole food. So,
Good differentiation.
so things like, meat, poultry, fish, eggs, those things are whole foods. Any fruits and vegetables, nuts, all of those kind of things that you pick up and they have one ingredient, or you can buy them at the farmer's market.
Yeah. And the great thing about eating whole foods, let's even say 90% of the time, because we all know life gets in the way,
Yeah.
is that it's really hard to overeat on whole foods.
Yeah.
So if somebody's concerned about their weight, or if somebody's concerned about, which a lot of women that I work with are, you can eat a whole pile of vegetables and some really good chicken, and you're probably not going to affect the weight on the scale too much.
Yeah, exactly. It's really hard to sit down and overeat a bowl of broccoli, but you can sit down with a sleeve of, I think it's 'tis the season, right? Girl Scout cookie season. It's easy to sit down with some thin mints and eat a whole sleeve of them, right? Those are
Absolutely.
those are foods with no breaks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
No doubt. No
like
doubt.
you eat a half a cup of broccoli and you're like, okay, I'm done. I don't want any.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So we have to remember that when we're when people are listening, or when we're coaching, or when we're with our patients and whatnot, that like we can really push that they can eat as much as they can, like enjoy, not restrictive. I think a lot of people think that what we do when we prescribe something that is like more elimination, so you're taking out the sugar, the alcohol, the foods, the processed foods, ultimately leaves them feeling so restricted, but you don't have to be.
Well, and your tastes will change.
Yeah.
After a few weeks of eating like that, things taste different. An apple actually tastes really sweet when you haven't been eating a bunch of other junky sugar.
Yeah.
And food just tastes better because your body is kind of, I just don't want to say it sounds kind of woo woo, but it's more open to the food that you're giving it, because you're giving it nutritive food that your stomach can then talk to your brain and it understands what those things are, right? If you read a package of, if you look at the ingredients on a package and you don't understand what those ingredients are, your body doesn't know what those are either. So all you're doing is kind of gumming up the works when you eat those ultra processed foods.
Yeah, yeah, you're totally right. You're totally right. And I'm a big fan of, like, so obviously I want my clients also to eat whole food, and I eat whole foods and diet. I'm right on board with you that that is number one. You need to nourish your body. I really don't like the idea of villainizing food. I don't think that that gives people healthy perspective, but I do really try to differentiate between food that nourishes your body and food that might be detrimental.
Yeah.
You know
And
what
the
I mean?
reason that I would say to cut out some of these foods because they're stressors for most people is because you don't really know what they're doing to you until you take them out of your diet. So
Right.
if you stop eating gluten for a month or 2 months and then you start eating gluten again and you have a reaction, then you know. But what happens when you're eating it all the time is your body responds to it in a different way. It'll actually send out feel good hormones and whatnot to kind of cover up the bad things that you're putting in there, because some foods are so egregious to your system that your body just can't handle them. So it actually sends out feel good hormones when you eat them, which is, again, it doesn't make any sense, right? I'm eating this thing that's bad for me, but my body's telling me it makes me feel good. So I want to eat more of it.
Hmm.
And so we want to break that cycle. So getting those foods out of there will break the cycle. And then when you do eat them, your body responds in an appropriate way. Like, whoa, nope, we do not want that in here. And you will know immediately.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. All right, so food, diet, proper nutrition, number one for people off the cuff.
Yeah.
What's number two?
Get more sleep.
I love
People,
that one.
it's like, who doesn't love sleeping, right?
Oh yeah.
But we do things that kind of interfere with sleeping. So we start watching a show and it's really good, and so we end up binging it, and then the next thing we know, it's 2 a.m. and oh my gosh, we got to get up at 6. And or we stay on the computer or the TV till right before bed, and then can't fall asleep because your cortisol levels are up, or there's so many things that we do to interfere with our own sleep. But sleep is so important, and your body can't heal and do the things that it needs to do if you're not getting enough sleep. So I would say number two would be really shoot for 8 hours of sleep a night. And that means getting in, if you need to be up by 6, that means being in bed before 10 so you're asleep by 10. So starting to have some kind of a bedtime evening routine, like turning down your lights. That's one of the things I always talk to my clients about, because I can't tell you the number of people that I talk to and they have overhead lights on up until right before they go to bed. And that's just not signaling your body the right way to say, hey, melatonin, come on in, it's
Mhm.
time to get some sleep. To do things that are quieting in the evening
Mhm.
and get more sleep.
Your body does so much recovery, detoxing. It helps with inflammation, and ultimately, when you wake up in the morning, like you can handle stress better. You're not going to be craving caffeine and sugar all day long, and
Exactly.
it's almost as if your good night's sleep starts when you wake up, because if you caffeinate all day long from the first second you wake up, you're not sleeping at night. If you,
Exactly.
if you can't get productive at work for the first 6 hours because you're so exhausted, you might be working till 8, 9 o'clock at night. Same thing. You're in front of a computer, you're stimulated, your cortisol is running when it should absolutely not be.
Right. Exactly.
Good. Yeah,
Yeah. And it becomes sort of a vicious cycle.
absolutely.
And we've all had those nights where, oh, we don't sleep well, and you know how lousy you feel the next day. But just think of that on a continual basis. Like, so many people are continually sleep deprived, just like we are continually under stress. And the two go hand in hand, as you said. If you sleep better, then you handle stress better. So, and stress is such a huge component of health, or
Yeah.
stress reduction is.
Yeah. And I think that just making the point that your Monday to Friday, if people typically work Monday to Friday and you're up at 6 and you're in bed by 10, let's say, and you get a good night's sleep, that doesn't mean that on Saturday and Sunday, I mean, once in a while it's not going to kill you, but doesn't mean on Saturday and Sunday that you're, you don't go to bed till 2 or 3 in the morning and you sleep till 11 for 2 days and then you're exhausted Monday. Like, having a really good sleep schedule, even if it's within an hour or two every day, is going to be so much more beneficial long term for your hormones, for your whole body ultimately.
Everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for those people, I tend to work with a lot of women, and like you said, they have issues with weight loss. Yeah. If you're not sleeping, that's going to really impact your ability to lose weight.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. That tends to be a big one. I see that is a driver for a lot of women, to try to get healthy, which I can understand and I can empathize with. But also maybe at a point when you're completely stressed out in that exhaustive phase, not the time to be thinking about dieting.
Right. Well, and I think it's important to note that what we're talking about isn't a diet per se. Like, I don't want any of my clients to come in and think that this is something that they're just going to do for 3 months and then they're done. Right.
Hmm.
It's kind of like with exercise. You can't just you exercise until you get to a point where you're really healthy, and then you stop, because it just goes away.
Hmm.
So it has to be a lifestyle. You have to make the changes that you're going to do with your diet something that you can live with and that can be sustainable as a lifestyle choice permanently, so that you can continue to be feeling good after the 90 days are up.
Yeah.
And it isn't an all or nothing. It doesn't mean that you can't ever have things back in your diet again, or you can't enjoy foods or have a drink. It just means that they need to really fall into that category of treats, and something that's a treat is something that's a special occasion item. But we've gotten to the point where we want special occasion items all the time, right? I
Yes.
can't tell you the number of people that I talk to about this, and I say, well, here are the things that I'm going to ask you to give up, and they get really taken aback, like, but you mean I can't have I can't go out for drinks on the weekend, and I can't have pizza, and I can't, you know,
Maybe
so
not
it
right now.
right. So it has to be a balance. It's and it also has to be a priority. How much do you want to feel better? And how much do you really want to eat that pizza, to have the drink, or you name it,
Yeah.
and fill in the blank.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Okay. Number 3.
I would say move more for most people. I I think that the majority of people probably don't exercise enough. It's kind of like that idea of, I don't have time, I'm too busy, or they've fallen out of the habit of it, or they're so out of shape they're kind of embarrassed to go back.
Hmm. Hmm.
And you can start anywhere, right? It doesn't have to be, you don't have to go to a gym and start doing, like, let's say CrossFit, for example, right? That's maybe a little bit extreme for a lot of people, but adding in a 30-minute walk 3 times a week is a great way to get in some exercise. I'm a big proponent of taking 10-minute breaks throughout the day to do little bits of exercise. So
Sure.
pop in do a 10-minute yoga video for one of your breaks. During another break, take a walk around the block for 10 minutes. During another break, do 10 minutes of air squats and chair push-ups and dips and lunges, those kinds of things. Like,
Yeah.
you can find ways to move a little bit more. People always laugh, like, take the stairs, park further away when you go to the grocery store. I mean, those are little things that can add more movement into your day. But exercise is just, as someone who really loves the fitness world and really thinks that it has a huge place in someone's life, I would love to see people move a little bit more.
Yeah, I agree with you. All right, one sort of bonus one, and I know we weren't going to dive into it into heavy detail, but I know that functional lab testing is super important. What do you think about that?
I agree with you 100% because we can move the needle a lot with diet, right? We can get people to a place where they're feeling a lot better, but to really get someone to a place where they're enjoying optimal health again, we have to understand where their imbalances are. And functional lab testing is so different from the lab tests that people are going to get at their doctor's office, right? We're not just getting something back that says you're normal or you're in range or you're, sick and out of range, right? Our ranges are much smaller. And when we are looking at something, we're not just looking at one thing, right? So I run 6 foundational lab tests for most clients. And what that does is it allows me to kind of step back and get a really big picture view of everything that's going on in someone's body. And I can correlate that with all of the symptoms and their past medical history because I do a really extensive intake with all of my clients as well. And so I just think it's so crucial to be able to pinpoint where the imbalances are. And I say that, because it's what we learned and we know that it's right. But I also say that because that's what made the biggest difference for me. Like I said, I started with diet. It moved the needle a lot. I felt a lot better. But it wasn't until I got my functional lab tests back and I could really understand what was going on in my body and where things were not working the way they should so that I could understand how to fix them. And then I could let my body get back to a place where it could heal itself because our bodies are designed really beautifully to do that as long as we're giving them the tools that they need to be able to do it.
Yeah, you said that beautifully. Beautifully. It is very important. Functional lab testing is important. It's different than what your doctor is going to do. Your doctor, if you even ask for a GI map or if you ask for a cortisol hormone, sex hormone test, they won't know what to do with it. They will not know what to do with it. I've gone and asked for a full thyroid panel, and my doctor looks at me and goes, "You don't need that." And now that I have the voice, I say, I'm happy to pay for it. Put it on the prescription, please, because I know that I need that. And here in Canada, we can't get thyroid panels or blood work done without a doctor requisition. So for those listening in Canada, go to your doctor, push for it because they can prescribe it. I don't know what it's like in the States. You're in the States, right?
I am.
Yeah. So in the States, I feel like you're either going to pay for it anyway or
Well, a lot of people have health insurance. And
yeah.
so if you have health insurance, the doctors are very limited by what the insurance will cover. So
Oh, so
it
you may
depends on whether or not your insurance will cover it. A lot of times they're willing to order lab tests for people, but you may end up paying for it out of pocket.
Yeah, so it would be similar to here. We have, like, obviously we have universal healthcare here, but it only covers XYZ testing. And if you want above and beyond that, yeah, you will be paying out of pocket for it. But for a thyroid panel, if you really want to dig deep into that specifically, then you need all of the numbers.
Right.
Just like you're talking about all of the foundational labs, you need all the numbers if you want to create that crystal clear view of what's happening in somebody's body. So I've got one last question for you.
Okay.
If you could describe in one word
Mm.
how you feel today compared to how you felt before, going through your lupus diagnosis, going through the Lyme scenario, what would that word be?
That's a tough question, right? Just one word. I think I'm going to have to go with hopeful though.
Oh, I like that.
And I say that because 6 months ago, 8 months ago, I was feeling really very hopeless. And I had gotten to a point where I thought, I'm not going to be able to get to a place where I feel healthy again. And I just can't tell you the difference that I feel in myself personally. And I thought of this just the other day. I think it was Friday. I woke up and I thought, I feel fantastic today.
Love
And
that.
like I woke up, no alarm. I was wide awake. I was excited to get up and start my day and go to my yoga class. And I that's just night and day from where I was at. And that's really more, it's really more the me of 10 years ago or 12 years ago than it, it's been the me of recent times. And so I'm just feeling like I say hopeful because for the first time in a really long time, I feel like I'm on the right path to being that vibrant, healthy person that I want to be.
Hopeful. I love that for you. I'm very, very happy for you. It is a great place to be when you get to the other side of that crazy health journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been a long journey with a lot of ups and downs, but it's definitely been worth it. And I'm so glad to have found FDN and to be here in this place now.
Amazing. Well, Jennifer, thank you so much for chatting with me today and giving such valuable insight into the importance of actual proper nutrition, proper lifestyle and stress management, and ultimately some functional testing for overall health. Can you leave us with where our listeners can reach you?
Absolutely. So they can find me at thegetbettergirl.com. That's my website. And then Facebook and Instagram, they can search The Get Better Girl, and that's where they'll find me. And at all of those places, you can find a link to schedule a free discovery call. So if anybody wants to schedule some time to just talk to me, to share maybe what they're going through and to see if it's something that I can help with, I would love to do that.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Jennifer.
Thank you, Michelle. I really enjoyed visiting with you today.